Welcome to the Mama's Well podcast. We are digging deep into the gifts and the gaps of foster and adoptive parenting. I'm Tara Hutton, and I'm glad you're here. Mama's Well. Yes, she is. Well, hey guys, welcome to the Mama's Well podcast. I have so much on my heart today, and it feels a little jumbled up. If you're new to the podcast, this is a place where the tagline says we're digging deep into the gifts and gaps of foster and adoptive parenting, but I'm starting to feel like it's more than that. This is not just about foster and adoptive parenting. This is about just digging into all the things that parenting is teaching us, learning to reparent some places in me that my parents weren't able to, needs that my parents weren't able to meet, places that they weren't able to fill. And that's the design. Like, we are just human beings doing this parenting thing and accepting our humanness, accepting the humanness of our parents, and then learning to meet those needs, learning to fill those gaps. And so that's what this podcast is about. So if that's something that you can identify with, if something that you're interested in, something that you're seeing in your own life, then you're in the right place. Thank you for joining us. It's a place of vulnerability, a place of recognizing there's work to do, and it starts with being real about it and identifying what that work is. And that's kind of what I'm doing today, and it's messy, and it actually just came this morning. It's not, the concept hasn't just come this morning, but just wanting to share it and journaling. All of this happened this morning. I received a call from a dear friend who was driving this morning and passed her son, who is currently struggling in his own addictions, panhandling on the side of the road. And that was rough. And she called me and thankfully was able to reach out to share her fears and her anxieties and, let me know, like, she drove by. There was nothing to do, recognizing that he is on his own journey and that she is on hers, and all of her attempts to change or fix are not what's needed and not what's helpful. And she's having to turn back in and focus on herself. And that's really what we're all doing when we're raising kids who struggle. We want so badly to help, to fix, to heal. But the truth is, we can only control us. And sometimes we get lost in that need or that desire to help our children. If we could only just love them enough, if we could only give more, show more love, if we could have been more, the regrets, if we could have done it differently. But the truth is that we did what we could do, and we did the best we could, and we are doing the best we can. And so that kind of reminded me of something that's been going on in my head for a long time. And I don't know, I've never heard somebody call it this, but to me, it's this codependency that shows up in my parenting. And so I wanted to have an expert on, because obviously I love to look to the experts. But this expert, well, I'm just gonna pretend he's here with me today, and that's Dr. Brad Reedy. He's the author of The Journey of the Heroic Parent. So we're gonna pretend he's here, and I'm gonna read to you some of his wisdom and out of this great book. He also has a podcast called Evoke Therapy, I believe. I'll put it in the show notes, but it's a great resource. It's been a great resource for me, as well as both of his books, actually, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You. But today, Dr. Brad Reedy is going to join us, right, Dr. Brad Reedy? Oh, hi, Dr. Brad Reedy. Nice to have you. Hi, Tara. Nice to have you. And we're going to have a little reading from Dr. Reedy and what he says about codependency. He calls it co-participation. And I really, really think there's something to ponder. And even if you've never, ever considered that, Maybe you don't have any relationship with any addicts in your life, because that tends to be what we think about when we think of codependency. And I believe, that's where it started. And I'm gonna read some of Dr. Brad's writing that'll explain that a little bit more. But let's just start with what is codependency, and how, and just kind of think about this, how this line of thinking or this way of being might be showing up for you in parenting. Codependency. Well, let me talk. He starts by contrasting it with intimacy. And a word that we use a lot with trauma and with TBRI is connection. So intimacy, connection, you could use those words interchangeably. Codependency can be, and this is Dr. Brad Reedy, by the way. Codependency can be understood by contrasting it with intimacy. Intimacy is the connection two distinct people share. Codependency happens when two people share oneself. And that's kind of sounds weird, but we get mixed up between who we are and who they are. Some people mistake intimacy as the warm feeling that we might experience in a romantic love. But romantic love, at least in the early stages, is riddled with projections. We're not really in a relationship with someone else. We're just in love with the parts of ourselves we see in them. So that gets kind of confusing. And so I'm going to skip. I don't want to get too deep into that place, but where I'm going is helping us understand what codependency is. He goes on to say that while he was teaching an in-service to some therapists on how attachment theory can inform us in repairing poor attachments for our clients, a therapist interjected, "What I see in families most is over-identification or over-attachment rather than a lack of attachment." Okay, stay with me here. I explained that an over-identification is the most severe form of poor attachment. Over-identification doesn't see the child as an other, but rather sees the child as an extension or a reflection of the parent. In such a relationship dynamic, there is only one person, the parent. The child is altogether missing in the parent's mind. So this is obviously a subconscious thinking. Let me read on. I think this might clarify a little. Codependency is essentially a lack of differentiation. I'm not saying it right, but being able to differentiate. It is being too close to another, so close that there's no space for the other person and their feelings. The term close doesn't really describe it accurately because it's actually disconnected. People who struggle with codependency have a lack of self, a lack of boundaries, and over-identification with others and their behaviors. Codependency is an inability to see the line between yourself and somebody else. It's an overreactivity, placing too much emphasis on how somebody reacts to you or what somebody else thinks or feels about you. It's a condition of supporting another's addiction or negative behavior in a complementary role. It's easy to fall into this trap when you have a child who is struggling. And I think that that probably is most of us. When we have a child who's struggling, it's easy to fall into this role. I think that, for me, codependency looks like needing my child to feel a certain way about me, needing my child to accept with gratitude the boundaries that I place, needing my child to understand me, to get me, needing my child's behavior to reflect all the work that I'm putting into it. And that can you see how that's about me? I can only do my part, and then their part is left to them. But so staying connected, this is something else. Dr. Reedy says, staying connected isn't about having them walk the path with you, but about providing them support so that they might find their own path. And that is hard because I want to believe that I know the path. I want to believe that I know the things they need to do, the steps they need to take, the direction they need to go to find their own way. But I don't. And I'm seeing that with my own grown boys now, is even though they're my biological boys, they are walking their own path, and it needs to be separate from me. And learning to trust that they're going to find that way is hard. And letting go that I know the way is hard. So let's ask Dr. Reedy another question. Where does codependency come from, Dr. Reedy? Oh, Tara, I'm glad that you would ask. And he goes on to say, the concept of codependency was originally established to acknowledge the responses and behaviors that people tend to develop while living with an alcoholic or a substance abuser. Since then, okay, and this is where I think it's really powerful to hear that, because maybe you think, well, I wasn't around an alcoholic or a substance abuser. But since then, codependency has expanded into a term that describes a dysfunctional pattern of living and problem solving that is developed in early childhood years. A codependent person is one who lets another's behavior affect him or her at a debilitating level and who obsesses over controlling, curing, or correcting that behavior. Codependency is in part an addiction to a crisis, drama, chaos, imbalance, stress, or disorder. There is some neuroscience that supports the idea that we can become addicted to the drama of being in an unhealthy relationships. So sometimes I think that God, life, brings to us the things that need healing. And sometimes, maybe we subconsciously even seek those things. And being for myself, I can see where these codependency issues kind of showed up, because I wanted my parents to be okay. I wanted my parents to be, I didn't want to do anything to make my parents upset, or so my big emotions, my big feelings, I suppressed those because I saw that they made my parents upset. And so that's kind of how that's gone on in my life as a parent. I want my kids to be okay. I need my kids to be okay for me to be okay. That's what I'm calling codependency. And when you're dealing with kids with really visible problems, like many of us are, that's hard, because it appears they're not okay. And so just being able to sit back and trust that process is a hard one. I think that it's easy to fall into the trap of it's easy to fall into this trap, especially when our kids are hurting, especially when our kids are really struggling, and it makes me feel really powerless at times. And so one of the things that I'm learning to do is to find, obviously I don't have power over my kids, or my husband, or any of the relationships outside of myself, but finding that power. What do I have power over? And there's really just one thing, and it's me. And there's even, things, there are things about me that are outside my power, but there are many, many things about me that are within my power. And so being able to focus back in on me is really the key for me to free up, to be able to allow my children to find their own way, to be able to support them finding their own path, like Dr. Reedy says. And so I just want us to ponder kind of what this codependency in parenting looks like as we're raising kids who struggle. And if you're still, if I've probably, because I am just still processing this, it may not have been clear, but I wrote down a few things that you might identify with. If you're wondering, like, well, I don't see this codependent, I don't understand what you mean. Let me just talk about a few things Dr. Reedy talks about. I jotted some notes on. Codependency often feels that codependents often feel that others hold the key to their safety, well-being, and happiness. Okay? That if this behavior would just change in this person, if this person would just stop doing what they're doing, then I would feel better. So they're holding the key to my safety, my well-being, and my happiness. The codependent also has trouble expressing feelings because they worry excessively about how those feelings might make others feel. And I might add, they have trouble expressing them outright. A lot of times the feelings kind of come out in a manipulative sort of way, because you're afraid to express them, so you want someone else to recognize that you have a need. And so that can come out passive aggressive or manipulative. So that's something to be aware of. Codependent may believe that taking care of herself is selfish or wrong. A lot of times we felt this from our mothers or our grandparents or religious people in our lives. Sometimes we're confused about what taking care of ourselves really is. And it's absolutely not selfish or wrong. And it's actually absolutely necessary. Codependents tend to take things personally. Codependents tend to have an intense fear of being hurt or rejected by others. So they may perform, they may hold, like that's one of the reasons they don't take care of themselves is they put themselves beneath the needs of someone else. A codependent may believe that, this is a big one. I want to read this, what he says on page 175. A codependent may believe, and this really hit the heart of me as an adoptive parent, and as a parent in general. A codependent person may believe that his love can cure and change another. This is an easy trap to fall into. It's intoxicating to believe in such a powerful notion. The codependent person may be encouraged when they see their child succeeding or becoming fixed. This makes the codependent person feel like they are integral to the solution and encourages dependence while discouraging growth in the child. It also keeps the child separated from the consequences and rewards of his own life. I'm going to go on and read this last little paragraph to wrap this up. We can make mistakes and give ourselves permission to struggle. It may take some work, especially if we grew up in an environment where it wasn't safe to bumble through things. And that's not a cop-out, nor is it a lack of accountability. It is you looking at your own humanness, accepting it, and demonstrating for your children that it's okay to make mistakes and acquire the wisdom they offer. The mistakes do offer wisdom. And I mean that you can look at yourself and say, I am imperfect, but I am still okay, and I am doing the best that I can, and I can do better. I love that. I love that. And so one of the things that in trying to separate from my children and separate from, recognizing that I have needs, recognizing that I need to take care of myself before I can take care of others, I thought that I wanted to spend some time, and I'm gonna do that on this next episode. I'm gonna stay, and we're gonna do 2 separate episodes. But this next episode, I want to talk about the ways in which I've learned and am learning to take care of myself. So right now, and until this next episode comes out, I want you to ponder codependency in parenting. Is that something that you recognize in yourself? Are you able to, separate? Because healthy connection is really a separation, right? It's not, we're not the same. We are not one and the same with our kids. We are who we are, and they are who they are. And so recognizing this immersion or codependence is important so that we can heal it. So between now and the next episode, I just want you to ponder, is this something that's showing up for you in your parenting? And maybe do a little journaling and see what you find. So I know I'm on this process still. I'm still kind of, you can tell this episode is like, I'm just digging through it and trying to figure it out for myself, but I think there's something there. So join me next time, and let's talk about the ways in which we can really, truly care for ourselves. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.
Mama's well.
Yes, she is.